Hello, everyone. Welcome to Horizons, JFF's National Summit gathering some of the boldest thinkers in education, labor, industry, government, and philanthropy. My name is Miriam Sullivan, and I'm a director in JFF's Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. And I'm really excited to welcome you to our session on Resilience Through Crisis, Apprenticeship Strategies in 2020, where you'll hear from leaders about how apprenticeships are both an equity engine and a community resource, and how they can be made more resilient to prevail even in economic crisis. At this time, I will turn the session over to our moderator, Vince Kohler, Senior Strategist for Capacity Building at Social Policy Research and Associates. Vince.
Thank you so much, Miriam, and thanks for being here. And I'm really excited to be here with this panel. Our topic of, connecting job seekers and youth to employment through apprenticeship, that's never an easy thing, but it's not easy when the economy is healthy and running on all its cylinders, and when talent is in short supply. But it's especially challenging in the middle of a global pandemic. And so now we have a year of experience in that. We've seen how apprenticeship programs have had to conduct outreach remotely and connect to apprentices through virtual learning, and work opportunities had, some of them stayed, and some workplaces themselves were in a little bit of turmoil. So this has been a challenging year. Still, for those of us committed to apprenticeships, we know that this is an engine for talent development and an engine for equity as well. And so I'm particularly delighted to have my panelists here who have had experience with apprenticeship programs through this difficult year. And I'd like to hear from them and have all of you hear how they've coped. So let's start first with just a round of introductions from the panel. I'm going to start with Todd Cohen.
All right, well, thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity. Todd Cohen, the lead for Strategic Workforce Initiatives organization at Lockheed Martin. So in this role, I oversee corporate workforce development initiatives, including apprenticeship building. So I lead a team, and our team works across our enterprise, identifies critical skill needs, and then works with the different functions of different organizations to design, develop, in some cases actually implement work-based learning, apprenticeship, and other comprehensive workforce development programs. And that includes brokering partnerships with community colleges, universities, workforce development partners. We do that all over the country. I've been doing this kind of work for about 20 years or so. I've been with Lockheed Martin for the last couple of years. So thrilled to be here.
Welcome to have you. Teresa Collins, Executive Director with 1199C. You need to unmute yourself, Teresa.
Thank you.
There we go.
I am the Executive Director of 1199C Training and Upgrading Fund, and we have multiple programs, apprenticeship programs in healthcare industry, early childhood, behavioral health, and we like to think that we always have our pulse on the community needs. We service members, and we also service community members, but union members as well, and provide programming, professional development. We're also a private licensed nursing school, and we are working on creating pathways across the nation, we say, but we have been successful in creating ECE, early childhood education career pathway from the beginning all the way through, from the CDA to the AA to the BA degree. And we are also the state of Pennsylvania sponsor for early childhood programs.
Great to have you. If there's something that's desperately needed, it's good early childhood education. So really glad to have you. Greg Namakar, who you're with the SEIU Local 26. Welcome.
Yes, very excited to be here and to be a part of this dialogue. So we are relatively new to the apprenticeship world. We're a union that represents about 8,000 security, janitorial, and property service workers in the Twin Cities. My name is Greg Namakar. I'm president of our local. And we have developed in this last year, since the killing of George Floyd in the Twin Cities, an initiative that we call the Community Safety Specialist Apprenticeship, really trying to bring the best of a professionalized approach to safety merged with some of the existing knowledge and wisdom in many of our communities in the Twin Cities, especially communities of color, about how to keep ourselves safe. So we're really excited about being in the middle of it and excited about this discussion.
Great. Welcome, Greg. And finally, last but not least, Jason portrayed with the funding and strategic partnership at the Workforce Development Council of Seattle-King County. It's a mouthful.
Vince.
Jason.
It's a long title and a long organization, but glad to be here. I work for the local workforce board in Seattle and King County, and we are not a program sponsor, but we want to figure out ways, and we have been figuring out ways to support apprenticeship locally, finding the place where the public workforce system fits in a complex apprenticeship environment, and helping apprenticeships and specifically apprentices in a real time of challenge. So looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Well, let's dive right in. So glad to have all of you here. First of all, what were some of the challenges that you've experienced in this last year, from the perspective that you come from as a board, as an employer, labor organization, apprenticeship provider? Let's go back to you, Todd.
Sure. And let me say a little bit about Lockheed, just for context here. We're the largest defense contractor. We have facilities all across the world, 114,000 employees. I would say significantly more than half are what I would call STEM professionals, but that includes competitive wage positions in engineering, precision production, advanced manufacturing, computer science, cyber, all of whom are designing, testing, manufacturing, building, deploying some of the most innovative technologies in the world. And apprenticeships are a significant part of our talent solution. We do have 33 registered apprenticeship programs right now, and I would say over 50 or so that are work-based learning, have all the components of an apprenticeship, have the instruction, have the on-the-job learning, mentorship, career pathway sort of component to it. Not technically registered, but we have 80 or so of these types of programs. So we're really invested in this work. Our apprenticeships also range from production operations to software engineering, cyber, program management, HR. So we're really, from a scope perspective, we're covering, we've really used this model to cover a whole bunch of disciplines. And then we're using it also as a model, like a pathway into the company, and we're hiring individuals, but also as of the last 18 months or so as an upskilling strategy. And I want to talk a little bit about that too. The challenges, though, I'd say for COVID related really are in a few areas. One is, just from the production operation side, electronics assemblers, electronics associate assemblers, aircraft maintenance. That's all hands-on training requirements. People need to be there. They need to be in place at the facility, touching tools, soldering, torquing, all that. So just, we've had to deal with how do you maintain the safe social distance? How do you maintain clean labs? All of that needed to be worked through over the past year. We had cohorts of up to 20 individuals. So how do you navigate that, but also maintain social distancing of 6 feet, and still stay in the same classroom? Some of the challenges. And then for the apprenticeships that were less about the hands-on training, more of our cyber and our software programs. Those still had components of in-person components, like in mentoring, for example. We had in-person, meeting with your mentor, meeting with your evaluator, as well as a lot of team-based projects. That on-the-job learning component was very team-based, where individuals are working on projects at the same time. They're meeting together. It's really it's an opportunity to create a network. So it's not just the learning, the on-the-job, how do you apply that knowledge, but then how do you build a network? So as you advance in our company, you're really built to become a leader. And all of that was in person, and all of that had to change, and was a challenge for our program leads to work through.
Clearly, we want to come back to how how that got established, and also what's ahead for us. How about what was your experience, Teresa, at 1199C? How were you impacted by COVID-related effects?
Well, we were greatly impacted by COVID. Most of our programs are on site and require that students come in. And I know it was a day in March, we literally ran from the building and then literally ran back to see how we can continue to engage students and running to IT to help us get set up. I can't say that our technology was in a good place during COVID. So that was a big challenge. And learning the Blackboard and learning how to keep students involved. So it was very challenging to keep the numbers, have discussions with the funders, fear of losing funding. If you have benchmarks that say students have to be in, like our nurses, they have to do the clinicals. Well, no one would accept them. They have to do so many hours on site. So that was challenging, but I guess we'll get to this later. But something else came into the room other than COVID. It was the racial injustice and all of those things came almost ahead of COVID. The killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the riots in the streets. So that came into the room, and then that just took us in a lot of different places and spaces, and keeping people engaged and holding on to our apprenticeship programs, because in the early childhood piece, that requires that people are on site. So what do we do? How do we keep them engaged? How do we not lose them as apprentices? So we came up with some unique strategies to engage our apprentices. I don't know if you
Great.
want me to
All
talk.
right.
Wait.
Well, we'll come back to the strategies specifically. So I'll be very eager to hear that, both on the impact side, but also how did you deal with that? Greg, what was your experience like in the early days?
So in our case, the apprenticeship really came out of the we call them the dual pandemics. One was COVID-19, and the other was the violence and racism and just disruption that happened in our community in the Twin Cities after the death of George Floyd. And for context, so security in the Twin Cities requires 12 hours of state mandated training. It's a pretty low threshold. And for a long time, many of our members, mostly Black and Brown folks in the security industry, felt like there had to be some kind of ladder, some kind of way to advance their careers, some way forward, but weren't really able to figure out how to do that. And in the midst of this this pandemic and the outcome of the protests, we really started to ask ourselves, what is the specific voice of our union in the midst of this? And so out of that came this community safety specialist apprenticeship. And fundamentally what it does now is it moves towards a model of 200 classroom hours, 2,000 hours of mentorship in the street, to really try and anchor deeply in a set of ideas that both draw on the professionalism of the private security industry, but also recognize that that is a very limited context, right? That's fundamentally, to put it bluntly, kind of protecting other people's buildings. What would that look like if we took some of those same concepts and really started to apply them within communities? In the Twin Cities context, it's mostly communities of color, immigrant communities, where folks started to have a sense for themselves, we want to take care of our own community. So what would that look like? What would safety mean? Out of that came a whole set of dialogues around de-escalation, around mental health, around drug addiction, and really trying to create an environment where people, through relationships, could help to de-escalate and depolarize many of the situations that led to people in the community feeling unsafe. So that structure was built, and we got that recognized by the state of Minnesota as an apprenticeship after 10 months of working really hard on it. And I think at the second part of this that we've really learned a lot from is that the community partners that we wanted to partner with then as a first pilot project for this apprenticeship, it became clear that many of the communities in the Twin Cities already have quite sophisticated, informal, relationally based ways of keeping their community safe. That's moving through family, through friends, through elders. There are a lot of existing systems that were already there. And so it also kind of shaped our thinking about the apprenticeship, which is this is not about giving a set of tools, to folks that are starting from zero. There is a bunch of functioning systems that this apprenticeship needs to help upskill and also legitimate in the eyes of the broader community about the critical safety work that can happen if we invest in it. And so I think in many ways, as we talked about at the beginning of this session, how can apprenticeships be about an equity engine? For us, this really has become now a way for us to invest community resources into the existing safety infrastructures that are already there. They're just informal, and to really skill them up, give them the kind of training that they need to be recognized and to be able to have a seat at the community safety table as we try and figure out better ways to do policing and community safety.
That really also shows the sort of the flexibility of the apprenticeship model, because here you have an apprenticeship actually built coming out of both a need take three. That's a real example of the resilience of the apprenticeship model, because it shows how you were able to take folks in a local context who have an understanding of the community and apply some technical knowledge and then turn them into community assets. So that's such a good example. Jason, what about you? What happened in King County during COVID as far as apprenticeship is concerned?
Yeah, in King County, Western Washington, and Seattle, we saw a whole host of challenges that some of the other speakers have spoken to a little bit. One of those, echoing Todd, is the health and safety challenges that we've seen across employers that we're all familiar with at this point. Another was that Boeing announced that they were going to move their 787 line to South Carolina. So that was a major local employer. They don't do much in apprenticeship, but their supply chain sure does. And so we're still figuring that one out and what that's going to look like locally as that 787 line departs. Another is that our unemployment insurance system did not keep up for workers or apprentices. Long waits, months-long waits for apprentices that were laid off to get unemployment insurance, and we're still digging ourselves out of that one at the state level. But still, there was a need for skilled workers, so there was still the challenge of finding and recruiting skilled workers. And the occupations may have changed, but there was still that need for IT professionals, still the need for truck drivers, still the need for skilled trades, and we have not seen that slow down very much. So that challenge that we've been facing for years continue to face.
So it seems like we've already moved into sort of the strategies that were deployed, especially came to what Greg mentioned, the example that he brought up, the strategies to cope with that. So we're going to mix it up a little bit. I'm just curious, because I know, Teresa, you were inching to go there. What were the strategies that you used to cope with this really challenging situation that you found yourself in?
Well, it was very challenging because being from a Black and Brown community, I had the same feelings and pain. So what we did with our apprentices is many of them, we offered weekly sessions just so they could drop in. They would be in the evening. Some were still working. Others were doing work, working virtually with the children, or nurse aides who couldn't become employed because of the lack of their clinicals. So we would host weekly meetings in the evening, and some of those started out with just people talking about their pain and and how they felt about the situation, and just being able to have a forum to discuss. We started to bring in different trainers or facilitators to address some of those issues, and then it turned into activities like dinner together or drinks. I drank water. I don't know what anyone else is drinking, but drinks together in the evening, or dinner. We would bring our dinner to the meeting, or we would play Jeopardy, or we would do some healing games and activities, and also talk about apprenticeship in the workplace and how they felt. And so we kept that going on weekly, and offered different seminars with maybe Black doctors in the community, because there was COVID that was killing the communities, but then there was also the economic piece that had some destruction, and with employers having to close their doors or death of family members. And I thought that was a way to sort of bring some type of circle of healing to the apprentices. And we didn't lose any. We worked out a plan with the state that they could still stay as apprentices and earn that on-the-job learning, even if they were attending our workshops, because they were getting credit for the workshops. And then also, if they were working virtually, they could still earn that credit. And that meant a lot to the apprentices to be connected, but then also be able to, sustain their, status as an apprentice. So we supported them in ways like that. We also had financial supports, fundraising that we were able to do. We called it your COVID check. We're sending you a COVID check, and it would be an amount, because apprentices did talk to us about how devastating it was, even for just a partner or a spouse to be without a check, and what would happen. There was a lot that came out of that. Linkages, the gentleman spoke about, to unemployment for some, so helping them navigate that, and helping them navigate attorneys, and helping some navigate domestic violence or referrals like that. So we sort of took on that social service, that human side of apprenticeship programs that sometimes we forget about through the getting the numbers, fulfilling the hours, meeting the competencies. We had to take on a different role.
Do you have a sense that some of that will stay with you, that you want to retain some of that aspect, that it may have been forced upon you, but now you realize that's actually an important aspect of program operation?
Yes, I'm glad you asked it. It's a part of all of us now. I needed those weekly meetings as well, but now we have really established a type of curriculum to add, or training to add on trauma and other activities. So yes, it has continued. Our weekly meetings continue, and we feel that it's keeping the apprentices, more rounded, feeling more supported, and more connected to the work. So out of that, we grew, emotionally, and we actually recruited so many apprentices. I had to put them on a waiting list, during a pandemic. We had a big waiting list of apprentices.
So there was just word of mouth that sort of helped recruit other people.
Word of mouth, and because I think it's important that you really have your pulse on the community needs and what's going on, not having a blind eye, and really being human, taking that human approach to apprenticeship models, strategies, infrastructures, and we did all of that, added additional people or volunteers to support the projects.
What about at Lockheed, Todd? What were some of your strategies that helped you cope through this?
Yeah. I mean, I'm proud of, we did not take our foot off the pedal. I mean, we kept, every apprenticeship is as strong as it was. And so I bucket this into three areas. It's the recruiting, sourcing part of the apprenticeship. So how do we find participants and hire them? Changes there. The training design, we redesigned training, and then we re-looked at how we deliver the training. So let me just give a couple of examples. On the sourcing side, which includes really informational sessions and how we actually hire apprentices, that used to be all in person. All of it, all of that work. So we'd work with the Workforce Development Center as an example, and do an information session, and we'd go, and it would really be an all-day affair. You drive there, you set up, informational session, you deliver, you return. And it now is all through Zoom, and it's recorded. And the ROI for us has been great, because I mean, it requires less of our individuals to go and spend that time. But it actually has increased the pool of talent, because before the in-person informational sessions, it was, whoever could make it at that time, that was who was in the room. Now the sessions are recorded, so the talent pool is much larger for us to then tap into these opportunities. So it's been, really good on that side, but all our hiring is done now through Zoom, and that's not going to change. I mean, that'll be that way. On the design side, a couple of things. I mean, obviously, all of our online learning, migrating all that in-person training to some type of online or virtual modality. And that's true for our production. I mean, all of our production, everything has some components of virtual training now. But then also the incorporation of technology, and I'll give so two quick examples: action cameras and sort of like what we all know as GoPros, for example, and then digital microscopes. So this, with our touch labor occupations and those apprentices, before you would have an individual working on a piece of equipment, and the mentor, the instructor, would have to be right there, watching, evaluating. But that's not, you can't, that's not maintaining safe distances there. So incorporating this technology has allowed the instructor now to use the equipment, work through the components, and then that work gets viewed on a monitor for all the class to see from a safe distance. And then vice versa, as a participant is working on the equipment, they're wearing the GoPro and they're holding the microscope. And then what they're doing gets displayed on the instructor's tablet, and they can communicate in person. So it's worked that way, but also it actually is just realizing that you can do, it's less about a one-on-one always relationship between the instructor and the individual. And now we're doing much more of these cohort-based courses where everybody's learning it. So you can move through the modules much more quickly using this technology. So that's worked really well. And then on the delivery side, I mean, just all where we align to CDC requirements. So, masks, social distancing, temperature checks we implemented going in. And then our training cohort, we had to do more training. We had to do more courses because we had to reduce the sizes. So just to maintain the safe distances, more courses. It did require us to hire more instructors so that we could have those courses. But those are some of the changes. So we certainly had to invest more, but I think, we're happy with where things have ended.
Yeah, some good examples of how you had to sort of retool, and I guess it's always interesting to see what will we retain going into this post-COVID, because certain things perhaps give us more access to talent. As you said, it might actually make programs more accessible by having this virtual access point, while other things really still have to be in person. Going forward, maybe going with the next question, I'm going to go to Greg. What do you see as the future? You have sort of a unique vantage point as a brand new program. How do you see it evolve into the next year and the year after in your ideal world?
So, we know we're going to learn a lot in these first years, and we are getting phone calls daily from different parts, different neighborhoods within our city, asking for some kind of a similar approach as well. So, we have 15 apprentices going through the first cycle. We think by winter or spring of next year, we could have 150 apprentices, just expanding out to some of the other areas. So there's a real desire for this kind of community anchored approaches to de-escalatory safety. It's interesting too on the apprentice side. There was a press conference here locally about the program with the support of some of the local politicians, and literally the next day we got like 90 inquiries for to get into the apprenticeship. So I think it just holds up that there is a hunger out there in a lot of the communities about higher skilled, how do we make this into a real profession? And just so many of the jobs out there right now, even jobs in this same area, right? I mean, there's a lot of both informal and even paid versions of kind of community safety, but again, often at very low wage, almost volunteer situations. So making this public argument that this is something worth investing in to make at the apprenticeship level to really have become a skilled trade, I think people are hungry for it. People want to see themselves there. The same folks who weren't going to apply to the same type of job at $7, $8, $9 an hour are now, quite interested in this if it's a path for their career. One other piece that we're trying to weave into it is to make the actual direct employer a worker-owned cooperative, so that people can also have some equity as this becomes more successful and be able to own, the actual companies that are doing this. So we hope that's the future.
Sounds like a really, forward-looking strategy. What about King County? What do you see as the opportunities, both with the learnings that you had over this past year and just looking forward? Where would you like to see your programming go in the next year or so?
Yeah, I think that the kind of things that Greg just talked about responding to community needs, building wealth in communities. Those are absolutely something that we want to see happen here and want to align the public workforce system as much as possible to do that. But along with that, I think we see that new occupations, new sectors, and new employers are probably one of the ways that we want to grow apprenticeship. So we've seen new occupations in logistics over this past year, as we've seen the logistics sector explode, and a real interest locally in white-collar apprenticeships as well. So insurance, banking, and finance, another way of building wealth in communities as well, since so many of those are good-paying jobs. And then we want to, I mean, we're always looking to great ideas like the things that Greg is doing and down in California as well, where they're working on cannabis apprenticeships. So large industry here in Washington State. Somebody has probably already called them green collar jobs, but looking at white collar jobs, looking at green collar jobs as well, and occupations where people have an opportunity to grow into, see those wage gains, see a culture of safety, have that mentoring that's so important in apprenticeship.
Thanks, Jason. Teresa, what do you see in the future? Obviously, healthcare is in particular in need of talent, and early childhood education especially so. What do you see as the opportunity moving forward with the experience that you just have behind you?
I also think creating opportunities for wealth in our Black and Brown communities, and not just having an apprenticeship, but having a career pathway that leads to sustainable and increased income. So that's really has been my focus the past few months, is trying to develop clear-cut, comprehensive, pathways, career pathways, not just stopping at like EMT, but taking it through to the certification and then paramedics. Partnering more with hospitals so that our nurses and so that our CNAs have a place to do clinicals, and eventually those who are not incumbents are able to be employed in unionized programs and really take that pathway, accept that pathway. So we're doing a lot of recruitment and partnering with many of our agencies who are unionized, but then some who aren't. So sharing that. And then really uplifting our communities and making them aware of all the opportunities, and trying new apprenticeships that just aren't the state of, I say status quo in our office, but we're creating new ones and really learning and hearing and doing community assessments and seeing what the community needs and where the trends are. So that's what we're really looking at.
Maybe the final question, I'm going to start with Todd. How would you persuade, or what would you tell another employers, another company maybe in your industry, about why it is a worthwhile thing to have an apprenticeship, and how would you persuade them?
Yeah, probably two things. I mean, I think it's clear that the data shows investment in career development is what today's early career workers want, more than compensation even. It's the development, it's the career, it's the professional development, the acquisition that they want, and so this is an apprenticeship model is a perfect, opportunity for exactly that. But then also retention, and I think, we don't look at this enough actually with apprenticeships. That's what a company like Lockheed Martin would be interested in. That's what will get my leadership interested in wanting to continue the investment. Is this the type of thing where if we invest in these individuals, will they stay? And so far, what we've seen is yes. The answer is yes to that. But I would encourage any company and any organization that's pursuing this to really try to capture that data, because that's what's going to get a company to say, okay, maybe I will invest in this, because it is an investment. So those are really the two measures that I would look for. But I would say so far for apprenticeship, for us, they look good. It's good, what we've seen.
What do you think, Teresa? How would you persuade an employer, or how do you persuade employers to say, this is for me?
Well, I always say that it's a great workforce strategy where education and on-the-job learning meet at the intersection, and it allows the employer to build their workforce from within. So that's usually my buy-in, that we're not looking outside, but you're able to really build a skilled worker from within your company. And that's usually my selling point. And when they see the skills of the worker improving, their programming, everything improves. So I usually use that. You don't have to go outside. You don't have to get a consultant. You can look within and start building your workforce. And then you have some ownership. You have, that's the biggest buy-in that I as an employer built this wonderful skilled workforce, and it's also good for the community as well. So that's usually my selling point, and I get a lot of apprentices using that line.
Makes sense. Makes sense to me. Greg, you're a startup in a way. Are you the employer of record actually, or are you working with? You're not. Okay. Yeah. So how do you bring employers on? It sounds like it sells itself at the moment.
Yeah, the first step is the community need, and so it's almost at the political level and with public institutions really making decisions about investing in this type of experiment, I think is the first step. But I also just think in the long run, property services, our union just generally represents very low wage workers in subcontracted industries that if it wasn't for the union pushing up standards would still be making minimum wage part-time with no benefits. And I just think there's a dead end to that business model, especially in the economy that we're in right now, where a lot of those kind of companies that are really paying the absolute minimum are just in a place where they have a very acute labor shortage, and they are losing contracts right and left because they just can't supply the labor. And I just think in this kind of competitive environment, and who knows how long this particular ebb and flow in the economy will last, but in this particular moment, companies that are investing in their workers, even if it's in traditionally low-skilled professions, really have a chance of holding on to folks and being able to fill those slots. We're seeing this in events work. We're now launching a apprenticeship in window cleaning. We're interested in trying to start one in janitorial. These are industries that even 5 years ago people would have laughed at, saying, "Why would you skill it up? It's a low wage, zero bar to entry kind of job." But you can't fill those jobs now. So where do we go from here? And I think apprenticeships are an incredibly powerful model for the future.
Jason, how about your organization? How do you persuade employers?
Sure. So I don't put myself out front and center, the guy with too many acronyms and thinking about grants and contracts and all this stuff. Look for employer champions that can speak the same language to other employers. I have found that they are able to say this better than me, and so got some great employer champions locally, and allow them to share what makes apprenticeship make sense for them. It's usually focused on return on investment.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being on the panel today. Todd Cohen with Lockheed, Teresa Collins with 1199C, Greg Namakar with SCIU Local 26, and Jason Portrait with the King County Workforce Development Board. And I'll hand it back to you, Miriam.
Great. Thank you so much, Vince, Greg, Teresa, Jason, and Todd. It's clear that the conversation just got started, so please visit jff.org to see how we continue the conversation. Thank you very much.